Daniella, how you doing? Okay, let me take a look. Hi. Attached is my first iteration on the back of the poster. I also attached the front, which has gone through 10 different iterations, and I'm close to being happy with it. I appreciate everyone's feedback. Okay, yeah, that's really normal, Danielle. It's really normal to 10, 12 iterations. I mean, sometimes designers go through dozens of iterations before an art director says, okay, we're there. So don't get discouraged. I mean, it's all part of it. I mean, I would say most of the class has probably gone through at least 10 iterations. So it's perfectly normal, right? All right, thank you for including the front and the back, and I'll comment on both. So we'll take a look at the front, then we'll take a look at the back. We'll take a look at the unity between the front and the back. We'll take a look at your conceptual ideas. We'll take a look at methodology, and of course, we'll look at typography. So let's start with the front of the poster, which I have up here. Now, there's a couple of comments here, and please, I'm going to make I'm going to be really honest with you, okay, because I think that's the best way to go about this in critique. So I just want to kind of start by just reinforcing the fact that I don't get discouraged here, okay? My comments are not meant to be discouraging. They're meant to be nurturing. So please just take this as critical um, advice for improvement. Okay, the front of the poster, I think there's too much going on here. Using the stars, it's a good idea, but it's way overdone. You've got stars all over the place here, and I think it's way overdone. My recommendation, if you're going to use a star, is just to use it in one area. Find the spot where it's going to be, where you can incorporate it most effectively into the type. Now, this might involve even getting in there with your type and making some adjustments to make sure that the star, for example, we could place the star right here on the top of the B, and that's it. That's it. It's noticeable. It creates the message. It creates meaning without overkill and without this kind of visual clutter. Meaning, not a derogatory term, but meaning it's a industry specific term that means a convergence of too many visual elements in one specific portion of a composition. And I think the stars here do constitute too many elements converging in one area. So my recommendation is that to take the star and just use it in one area, and make it prominent and set up your concept therein. Okay. Um, Evolution of the stars. I think it's. I see what you're doing here, and I get it. I get it, but don't forget, there's illustration is not permitted on the front of the poster. The only illustration that's allowed on the front of the poster has got to be worked into the typography. Okay, so any kind of standalone illustrations or images are not permissible. So please understand what I'm saying. If you have any questions at all about that, let me know, because it's important that we don't use. Now, I understand why you're using this. You're using this to set up the timeline. I think it's an effective idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't adhere to project specifications and requirements in this regard. Okay, so we got to remove those planets or stars. I'm not sure. Then at that point, since these are kind of forcing the tagline over to the right, I would recommend that we bring that tagline back over and maybe right align it here. And we want to create a higher degree of connection between the tag and the headline, and proximity will do that. The next thing I'm going to mention is this. Once you take that, maybe right align it right there, use your star for the ascender for the B, and take that whole configuration, bring it down right here and place it in the corner right down here. Reduce the size and place it right here. And I think that will really reinforce the expansiveness of space. Okay, so and that'll just really, and that way you're using negative space as a design element, as a message creating. Okay, now let's move to the as far as the front, I think that a lot of areas can improve your kerning. Okay, so for example, that space right there, that space right there, there. But these all look good. Look good. That can be closed down a little bit right there. Close that. A little bit right there. That can be narrowed down. That space can be narrowed. That's okay. That can be narrowed. This can be narrowed. Right there. And then right there, and that'll do it. So you'll definitely want to pay attention to your kerning. Okay, let's jump over to the back of the poster, And let's see what we have here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a look at the type itself, then we'll look at the concept. Okay, typographically, let's get in here, and you got to adjust these numbers. The numbers stand out like a sore thumb because they're standard default numbers, therefore they're too big. And that's the way that numbers are designed in a typeface. They're not designed optimally to be presented in a line of copy with type because the numbers are typically too large. That way, so that's the reason we use either old style numerals, and there's a tutorial about that in the course announcements, or reduce the size of the type. Old style, if the open type menu is not available and you don't have access to old style numerals, just go ahead and select your numbers and just reduce the size by about 20% or so, so they don't stand out like this. Okay. Rags need to be adjusted. Definitely, your rags haven't. It looks like they're default. They haven't been adjusted at all. So again, there's a video in the announcements about how to adjust your rags. I would like to see the rags adjusted for your final. 19th, that should be super. Sorry about that. Where was I? I was 19th. The th should be superscript. Okay. Child of. Okay. A Doll's House should be italicized. It's a title. Oh, I saw an improper use of a dash here. Where was it? I'll get to it. Okay, so there it is right there. That should be an N dash. N is in Nancy. Okay. All caps right here. I'm sorry, small caps in BS. See, all small caps. Again, there's a tutorial. Excuse me. RH, small caps. PhD, small caps. N dash between those two numbers. He became. That's a title too. You might italicize that right here. This Morton H. Dull, Distinguished Service Professor of Theoretical Astrophysics. Okay. Okay, so I would definitely like to see those addressed in your final. It's basically your M and your use of dashes and hyphens. Small caps were applicable, and then old style numerals or reduce the size. Nice drop cap, by the way. Interesting technique to use a different typeface for the drop cap. I think that's interesting as heck. Good job, good thinking. Okay, let's talk about the timeline. I don't think the timeline's effective. First of all, it's because you're continuing part of the front, but that part of the front is not permissible, right? So basically, I would redo your timeline. I understand what you're doing here, and conceptually, it's interesting. You start with this little tiny star, and then you're building and building, and to the apex of his career is the biggest star, and then as we're kind of nearing the end of his career and his eventual death. So that's really super interesting. The only thing is that, I mean, I would say that the timeline itself needs to be designed further. Right now, you have these little illustrations, but they're not indicative markers of the timeline. They're just a basic. This is the timeline right here, and this is considered a separate illustration because you don't have an individual event tied to a specific portion of the timeline. You're just showing this part of the timeline and then several events, this part of the timeline and then several events. Do you see what I'm saying? And a really good example of a timeline is right here. This is excellent. Trisha, I'm using your example. I think it's a little overdone, but nonetheless, it is. You see how each point in the timeline has a event tied to it? Do you see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm talking about in yours, is just to try to establish a point and then establish an event in a timeline instead of just stacking your timelines with one point. You see what I'm saying? You're stacking your events with one event. I'm sorry, stacking the indicator of the timeline with several events. Okay. So right now, I think that you've got. Oh, by the way, this whole thing has shifted left. We're a little out of balance here. Just take a look at the right margin; is huge, whereas the left margin is bleeding. And that's okay. I would increase this gutter right here, though. I would take this whole type configuration and move it over if you want that image to bleed. I don't see any reason for it. So what I would do is I would take this entire configuration here and just shift it over, even out your margins on either side. Okay. I know I've thrown a lot at you. Um, and as I said, I just, you're so close. You're so close. My goal is for you to come out of this class with a portfolio piece. So that's why I'm being so critical and kind of nitpicking, so to speak. But it is typography, and it is all about fine detail. So let's go ahead and address those comments and make the necessary adjustments. If you have any questions at all, Danielle, please let me know. Okay, like I said, you're so close that I can feel it. You're so close, but not there yet. Okay. Again, any questions at all, please let me know. Thank you very much, Danielle.